Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy slamming overnight Russian attacks as what for him is, quote, a clear signal that Moscow is not serious about pursuing real peace. Ukrainian officials say Moscow launched strikes on the Mykolaiv region and the city of Kryvyi Rih, with drone attacks on the city the largest it has seen since the war started. The strikes coming just hours after Ukraine and Russia reached separate deals with the United States to pause attacks over the Black Sea and against energy targets. The ceasefire brokered by the US in Saudi Arabia is the first formal commitment by both Russia and Ukraine since President Donald Trump took office. While both sides say they will rely on Washington to enforce those accords, disagreements already apparently surfacing, at least on implementation. And more, we're joined by our correspondents Will Denselow, live from Kyiv, and Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Let's talk to Will first. Will, those overnight strikes suggesting that Russia and Ukraine might not be in agreement, at least on the time at which these partial ceasefires should begin. How likely is it that these separate deals, each reached separately with the United States, might actually be implemented?
Well, when it comes to those overnight strikes, we've heard from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy saying that there were roughly 117 drones or aerial attacks across the country. You mentioned his reaction to that, very strong indeed, saying that Russia isn't interested in a lasting peace. We have also had a very strong reaction from Ukraine's foreign minister, saying that pressure is the only cure to Russian lies. This, of course, comes as Moscow is calling for a degree of sanctions relief for this agreement to come into effect. The message here in Kyiv is exactly the opposite. What we're hearing from the Ukrainian officials, they are imploring their allies, be it the United States, be it in Europe or around the world, to increase the pressure on Russia, whether that is through tightening existing sanctions, certainly more military and defense support for Kyiv as well. This comes as Ukraine's president is traveling to France this Wednesday for a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron to discuss lasting security guarantees in the possibility of a ceasefire agreement being agreed in the future. This comes a day before this so-called coalition of the willing is convening in the French capital for an extension of those conversations. So a very clear message we're hearing from Kyiv, that they are looking for lasting security guarantees, something that, of course, Moscow has said would be detrimental to any kind of lasting peace. So certainly a huge amount of division coming from Kyiv and Moscow, even after some brief optimism with these separate agreements being brokered by the US earlier this week.
And Dasha, we heard that strong reaction Will outlined from not just Ukraine's president, but from its officials as well. And Russia would have known it would get this strong reaction. How has it explained these overnight strikes?
Well, the Kremlin insists that the moratorium on the strikes on the energy infrastructure that was agreed by President Putin and President of the United States, Donald Trump, in their phone conversation on the 18th of March is still in place. Russia is not targeting the energy infrastructure of Ukraine, and that was part of the deal. Meanwhile, we are hearing the Russian Ministry of Defense confirming that there has been a strike against 143 areas of Ukraine that was targeting the infrastructure of the military airfields of Ukraine, the places where the ammunition is stored, places where drones are being produced, where the military equipment is being repaired. Moscow says those strikes were successful. But also we are hearing accusations on the Russian side that Ukraine is not abiding by the decision to impose this moratorium on the attacks against the energy infrastructure, suggesting that there have been more Ukrainian attacks against the Russian energy facilities in Kryvyi Crimea. They also say those were the facilities in Russia's Kursk and Bryansk regions that are located exactly on the border with Ukraine. And Moscow says that these Ukrainian strikes against Russian energy infrastructure are taking place because Ukraine is trying to sabotage that arrangement. Moscow says Kyiv is not interested in the negotiated settlement. Meanwhile, we're also hearing that Moscow is continuing its contacts with the United States, with Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov saying that Moscow is actually pleased with how those contacts are proceeding. He said that the cooperation between the two has resulted in the cooperation and the agreement on the list of what energy facilities would not be attacked. They have released this list, which includes the oil refineries, oil and gas pipelines, hydroelectric dams, nuclear power plants, as well as transformers, distribution centers, power networks. All of those issues and facilities have been outlined by Moscow and Washington. But also we understand that Moscow is saying that the second part and the most important part of the arrangement with the United States on the Black Sea initiative could only be implemented after Russian conditions are met.
Enormous divergence there between Ukraine and Russia there. Thanks from Denselow reporting live from Kyiv and Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow.